Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What a great pleasure, great introduction. Thank you very much. Puts me through a great amount of performance anxiety. I was trying to rub that empty Bisleri bottle, hoping for the genie to come out and make the presentation. Unfortunately, the genie didn't come out, and therefore I will have to go ahead with making this presentation with all kinds of performance anxieties that I'm going to be facing. My friend Vikas Vij, when he called me up and he said, you'll have to speak on a different topic. You're too mundane. You've been speaking about the same subject so often. Why don't you speak on something else? And I was about to be telling him that what a conspiracy of nature that you are running an entire convention on the Guru Purnima day, which is a day which represents the role that a leader plays not for himself and achievement of his goals, but the role that he really plays for the followers. And how could I be speaking on anything other than followership? Because predominantly, unless and until there is a follower, there is never going to be a leader. Remember this. It is the followers who make a leader, because if there are no followers, there are no leaders. So let me dedicate some time on the basis of what I have done and talk to you about the role of followership from the way and perspective I look at it. If you review the entire literature of management, there is umpteen number of books, training programs, literature, video transferences, and everything on the theme of leadership. Thousands and thousands of recalls will you have if you go on to any of the sites and put leadership as the topic that you're searching. But try and search for followership, and I promise you, not more than 5% of the same numbers that you found on leadership is what you're going to really find upon followership. So if you were to be an OD professional, which I presume most of you are, and if you were to try and find a client entry into diagnosis of what your system's problem is it, and you could find 100 different diagnostic areas, but if you were to really use followers and the relationship your followers have with the leaders in the organization and use that domain to do your client entry diagnosis, I promise you the kind of tales it will tell you about your organization is something that will surprise you. So if you were to look at a philosophical perspective and talk about, if I were to find the source of my understanding of followerships and in the new role, what do they do? Rather than just focusing on leadership, which most of us do in management literature, I would use this beautiful Sufi quote which says, "Apni soch ko badlo jani, sitare apne aap badal jayenge. Nazar ko badlo jani, nazare apne aap badal jayenge. Kashtiyan badalne ki zurrat na karo, dishaye badlo, kinare apne aap badal jayenge." If you are really trying to find the source, don't look at the wrong end. You will never find your sources there. But if you change your perspective of trying to understand what your organizations are about and understand the fact that it is actually the followers who are really be delivering the goals that you're setting for yourself, and try and do your analysis on that perspective, I promise you the chances of you getting the right answer is much better than to give unnecessarily lopsided view on trying to look at leadership and focus only on a single factor dimension called leadership. What I'm about to be presenting to you is on the basis of a research that we have undertaken for a future book that I'm writing, which is called Future Smart People Enterprises. We set out around 45 questions to 800 HR professionals worldwide, and on the basis of the responses, trying to find out what is it that organizations in the future need to be doing to insulate themselves against all kinds of volatilities in the changing environment that they would be facing. And therefore, there were some questions which were talking about followership. So we isolated those questions to be able to make your presentation on this. The question, and of course I'm not going to be presenting statistics to you that how many people said what versus how many people said what. I thought I'd rather use the findings to tell you a story of what the respondents were trying to tell on the basis of what we found. What can I do to achieve my goal and mission is generally the question that is being asked in organizations versus the real unasked question that you need to be asking as a leader. What can I say or do to to get individuals to cause themselves to do what I need them to do to achieve the goals. So it is about not leader achieving it, but it is about what a leader says or does that actually makes the people say or do the things that he wants to be achieving, and that's the question. Now, it is a subtly different thing, and it's not wordsmithery, but if you look at the subtle difference, it really makes the perspective totally different from a leader-driven perspective to a follower-driven perspective. Three very, very simple principles which people will not accept at times, but this is the real observation of social psychology. People do what their minds and emotions tell them to do, not what their leaders do. The perspective for you is therefore to understand their minds and emotions and be able to say that which will appeal to their minds and emotions rather than just saying things which don't even appeal to their minds and emotions. The follower is the one who provides the motivation, period. The leader cannot motivate others. The leader can only cause the followers to motivate themselves. So what do you do to cause, as a leader, your people under you to motivate themselves? Because motivation is self-driven. How do you motivate him to motivate himself to deliver the goals? And all motivation is self-serving. Efforts are made to personally satisfy reasons, but if you are unable to tie down the individual's reasons for doing things to the larger perspective, the chances that you will be able to motivate are zilch. Your ability to link his personal motivations to the larger purpose is the only basis on which the real principle of motivation will work. And these are the basic principles when we ask them the questions, what do you believe you as a leader need to be saying, or what do you believe you as a leader need to be doing to motivate your people? These were the responses we got from them. We just tried to assimilate it. Lopsided focus on leadership, paradox of pyramids, so much of focus on control and authority-driven understanding of organizational perspectives that finally you tend to really forget the role and contributions as deliveries to the value creation that the followers give you. Leadership and followership being two totally different roles. But because we tend to see them in a certain hierarchy, we tend to believe that one is just growing out of the other. But predominantly, if you look at what the two are doing, are predominantly two different roles. And we will try and see and understand as to what are the implications of these two different roles. If you really look at yourself, or I look at myself, everyone is a follower. And each one of us is playing more follower roles than actually leadership roles. You are a follower to a religious order. You are a follower to a friend group. You are a follower to the diktats of your wife at home or your husband at home. You are a follower of some particular sect. You are a follower in your own organization when you are doing different roles. You are part of a department where you have a boss where you are a follower. So each one of us, if we look at our roles and perspectives, we play a follower role much more than we play a leader role. And therefore, there can never be a good leader till first of all you learn the science of being a good follower. You're not a good follower, you are a poor leader. And you cannot say that I'm not a good follower but I can make a good leader. Because unless you're a good follower, you don't make a good leader. Therefore, it is very necessary for us to know what lies into the science of followership. So that if we can understand what is it that makes a good follower, then we can first become a good follower, because ultimately each one of us wants to become a good leader, and the route to becoming a good leader is only via the medium of becoming a good follower. Therefore, if we break open the shell, what will happen? Let's define a follower to understand whether our understanding and concept is similar. Follower is a person who acknowledges the focal leader as a continuing source of guidance and inspiration, regardless of whether there is any formal reporting relationship, informal reporting relationship, unmindful of that. The purpose of which is to achieve the goal. for which the primary membership in the group itself has been created. Let's analyze it a little more. Critical words. Why you should understand it. A follower is always a person. A leader need not be a person. You can be a follower to a religious norm. You can be follower to certain spiritual scripts. So the lead is not necessarily a human being, but a follower is necessarily a human being. So follower is a person, the prime responsibility of which is to acknowledge. You have to acknowledge what you're following. If you don't acknowledge that you're following it, you can't be a follower. So it is on the basis of acknowledgement of the focal leader. It is not a one-time event. You cannot say I'm a follower for a half an hour when I'm chasing something. So you are a follower on a continuous basis, the purpose of which is to give you guidance, inspiration, direction, whatever, to achieve the goals for which you took the primary membership. You joined a group because you wanted to achieve some things for yourself and for the larger purpose. So to that extent, he provides you direction and leadership. All right? So that's the role of a follower. Why do I follow my leader? And these are responses that the people gave to us. He provides me accurate and timely information. So if you as a leader do not provide that, chances are you will not have any followers. Because most people want to be followers only to people or directions which provide them accurate and timely information. Every individual has a need, and the larger group of which he has taken membership has a certain goal. Unless and until my leader fulfills my needs and aligns me to the larger purpose or the larger goal, unless there is a close alignment, there is no followership. So a leader who is only focused to deliver his purposes or his organization's purposes without being mindful of my own goals can never be my leader. Because predominantly, what did we say? The primary rule is only I can satisfy my needs. My boss can help me by aligning my needs with the larger purpose, and only when that alignment happens, then actually I will accept him as my leader. Perpetual agility is unless and until my leader has a unique ability to empathize, get into my shoes, and to be able to see the world outside of himself, it's only then that I will accept him as a leader. So as a follower, my need is that my boss not only understands my need, but is able to understand the needs of a larger universe which he is supposed to lead and give directions beyond himself. And that is called perpetual agility. And the last was behavioral agility. He is a person who gets me into action mode. He makes me do the things and ensure that those things which need to get done are done. It is only at that stage that I accept him as my leader. So there were four predominant focuses on what people told us, why do I follow a leader? He gives me information, blah, blah, blah. He links my need to the larger goal. He has perpetual agility, and he has behavioral agility. Now, if you were a doctor, and if you were to do a brain surgery of a follower and open the shell, what would you find inside? Okay, I'll talk about that a little later. But predominantly, therefore, a growing school of management thought today is talking about what is called organizational citizenship. New concept, new theme, new idea, maybe created by friends like Vikas Vij who need to run conferences with new labels and themes. But predominantly, organizational citizenship as a concept is the extent to which individuals' voluntary support and behavior in an organization contributes to the organizational success and organization culture. So each individual is very, very critical to do that. What, therefore, is the organization's expectation from each individual? Do they have a role, or their role is only to do what the leader is telling them to do in an organization? Organizational citizenship is a concept which talks about what is it that individuals can contribute to create success for the organization and define the enabling environment which gets represented in the culture of the organization. No need to discuss this. Followers are not necessarily successors. It is possible, because when we were talking about succession planning in our questions, they said that followers make good leaders, but it is not necessary that followers will necessarily be the successors to the leaders, because the two roles are totally different. So the chance of a follower becoming a leader is high, but it is not necessary that the follower will become the leader. All right? Followers could be voluntary, induced by purpose and alignment. I want to do something great in my life which your organization is doing. My needs and that organization needs are voluntarily meeting, so I seek membership. Then different things happen, and I'll show you what different things happen. It could be on the basis of a compulsory mandatory obedience to the leader, because, say in an army or a police, you do not follow your leader, you will meet consequences. Therefore, my association in that group is predominantly driven by my fear of punishment if I do not obey. And that becomes the source of which membership and behavior of the followers is tracked. And the third is what most of us in corporates feel and experience. Predominantly, the guy is neither connected to the purpose of the organization, nor is he worried. He's fulfilling his own purpose. He wants his money, he wants his career growth. There are no alignments. So the moment someone else is offering him greater need fulfillment for himself, he leaves your group and goes out. And constantly you worry, why is he leaving your organization and going? Predominantly because number one, there is no fear, there is no disobedience penalty. And the other is there is no strong alignment between his need fulfillment process and the purpose of the organization, which is the larger goal for which he took membership in. So therefore, this explains why this happens. As I said now, if you were a behavioral surgeon who was trying to commit surgery on the behavior of a follower and break open the shell to see what is it that I will find inside, you will find 4 paths when you do the surgery. First is the spiritual and the inspirational part of the behaviors of followers, which you got to be always mindful about. The second is the transactional part of his behaviors, and how do we influence the followers' transactional part of behaviors. Third, adversarial. Predominantly, followers are tested like leaders are tested in moments of adversities. It is not in peace times of operation that the leadership and followership of the Taj Mahal staff gets tested out. It is in moments of adversity where each individual follower who was being led by a leader by his individual behavior, and we have read stories about each behavior when each one of the small guys, the chef somewhere else, the steward somewhere else, the lady receptionist somewhere else, and the stories of their behaviors in adversarial moments, how at that point of time they show elements of followership. And that's what you test it out. And the fourth element is the relational element. Because unless you understand the relational elements, most teams or most organizations fail when you do not take care of the relational and transactional elements of responsibilities. Let me explain spiritual. Predominantly, by spirit, are you attached to some of the core values of the group? Because unless and until you are aligned, you're not going to do that. Are you self-disciplined man? The moment a person is not self-disciplined, he says, I am aligned, but does something totally different. Tells people, don't commit fraud. But the first time he gets an opportunity to give a driver's bill, which is not, as he was saying, is a tax-valid bill to be given, he's the first one to do it. So when you are not spiritually in sync with what you are saying or what the group norm is, then the chances are followership does not exist. Followership does not exist means value creation of your organization is going to be disturbed. How comfortable are you with? How calm are you with? What is your level of enthusiasm? Are you inspired enough by the leadership in the organization? Are you loyal? Are you trustful? These are some of the elements which predominantly decide whether the spiritual element of your group is intact or not, because unless the spiritual element of your group is intact, you will not get your followers to do what you're doing. So the leader can keep breaking his head, the leader can keep writing memos, he can keep conducting off-site programs, and we all believe that if you conduct an off-site program for 2 days, you will be able to en masse have the team working and responding to what you want them to do. They will have all the fun and games. They will enjoy. They will do all the outbound exercises. They would do whitewater river rafting and yet come back to their normal behaviors when they come back into the organization, because the spiritual quotient that ties them together is absolutely missing. Transactional. When people transact, what is it that followers are supposed to do? Are you solution-oriented? If you're solution-oriented, you become a follower. Have you done your preparations? Do people get committed? Do they enlarge the roles? So these are some of the elements. Oftentimes, followers fail in their transaction of the task. So while spirituality connects him to the larger purpose, transactional elements of the followers help him to transact the proceedings of the task far more effectively. In your day-to-day transaction, when you're doing jobs, where actual execution activity happens, at that point of time, how are you transacting? Are you transacting the way a good follower should transact? Is the basis on which this determination happens. Adversarial. I was explaining to you what is adversarial. What happens at the Taj Mahal Hotel, where every waiter, every steward, every front office receptionist takes the call to be seen and following the norm of a good leader to say, this is exactly what I can do. Are you able to show courage in moments of adversity? In fact, when we select leaders on the basis of 4 quotients. One is the information quotient. The second is the emotional quotient. The third is the spiritual quotient. And the fourth is the adversarial quotient. Because if everything is hunky-dory, if your products are being sold and the customer is waiting for you to produce things, you don't have to compete with any competitor because you are the only producer of those things, then why do you need to be there? Anyone who can just produce and distribute can become a great leader. It is only when the Coca-Colas of the world get into a situation when the pesticide issue hits them and suddenly the revenue of $4 billion become less than $1 billion and you don't know what to do because you think that the government is going to throw out, that's the point of time that your ability as a leader and your ability as a follower gets challenged. So what you do in trying to build the capability of your followers to be able to manage the adversities that come, not every day, but once in a while, and it is at this point of time the make or break happens, is one of the critical elements that you need to be bothering when you are saying, I want great followers, because followers deliver value, then what is it that you need to do to build the capability of the followers? And the last is relational. Oftentimes, organizations fail to deliver because the relationships of people within the organization are absolutely havocful. Teams don't work together. People don't pass information together. Papers get stuck off, sometimes consciously and sometimes planned. What, therefore, are the critical elements which stop people from passing critical information which delivers the organization the value is the purpose for which they have come together, and knowing fully well that if they don't pass this information or don't pass these papers on time, the larger purpose for which they have come together is not going to be fulfilled. And yet, at the same time, they do it for a variety of reasons, consciously knowing that this is going to stop them in achieving to their goals. What, therefore, is going on in the minds of the people, and what can organizations do to change these behaviors so that they keep seeing the larger purpose and not keep bothering about internal small relational issues? Adaptable, collaborative testing. And why am I telling you this? Because each one of us has developed huge amount of human resources capability to be able to assess some of these behaviors. Therefore, if you keep assessing in an interview only the biographical reality of an employee and then come to a conclusion whether he can do the job or not, without testing the entire ability of his performance in a group situation, whether he's able to perform as a team player or not, if he is going to be performing successfully in the group that he is going to be placed together or not, is he able to perform one of the 9 roles that he's supposed to perform in the bell bin? If you do not do that assessment, I promise you, a team of stars can't deliver value creation. It is only a leader with an absolutely complementary team of followers that can deliver value. So these are elements which you can do assessment of. Why do teams and followers break down? Ever thought of that? Temporary verbal alignment, no spiritual connect. Why do people, until yesterday, keep telling the leader, I will work only for you and I will not work with anyone else? And yet, the next day come and submit a resignation letter because there is a huge amount of verbal alignment, but not necessarily spiritual alignment. And therefore, that weakness develops a breakdown in a team of followers. Absence or loss of a charismatic leader, people get aligned to a charismatic leader. Are you a charismatic leader? Of course I want to work for you. But the moment, and I've been talking about this, I've been advising my friend Uddhav Thackeray, that you are running a political organization. He's a dear friend of mine and we used to play badminton in college together. And he keeps asking me, Adil, what do you feel about it at times? And I keep telling him, your organization is based on charismatic leaders. If you do not build a process of spreading your leadership, your followers will splinter the way anything can splinter away the moment the loss of a charismatic leader is going to happen. So therefore, build your organization leadership, otherwise it's not going to happen. Every child outgrows its role. So whenever a child outgrows and wants to get married, it doesn't mean that the child hates the parent. You outgrow your role and you look for a larger role. That's not anything wrong. If organizations cannot provide the followers suitable aspirational roles, then they got to be ready to be able to let the person go. Look at the study done by the Manchester School. It's any idea how many jobs people are going to change in 2025 on an average worldwide? What's your guess? How many jobs are going to be changed? People on an average will change how many jobs? It's a properly structured. No, 6 is now. The current world record is, world average is 6. So if today is 6, what is going to be 2025? Throw some numbers, it's okay. You have not read the report, you don't know the number. And certainly it has to be an alarming number, otherwise I won't ask. Right, logical. What's the number? Throw, man, throw. 10. 20. Surprising. 20 changes? Wow. Any more luck? 35 changes. 35 changes. Now, if you in your organization are planning to have your processes and systems, which are lifelong employment systems, lifelong employment processes, and the inventory outside is taking 31 turns. So the inventory is taking 31 turns. Your system is designed for a lifelong employment. Every time a person says, I'm resigning, you're going to jump from the seat of your pants. Because your organizational systems are not geared to keep pace with the entire inventory change in the market. Simple supply chain logic, right? So these aspirations are outgrowing. You've got to create a reality in your organization to see that you match the aspirations of your followers. Don't do it. Bad luck, you're going to lose your followers. Inclination to new thought. Till now, I loved the wonderful thought and ideology that my leader is having. Suddenly, I have got exposed to a new ideology and a new thought, and the human mind finds that thought very attractive, and therefore I'm taking a decision to move out of being a follower. So that could be. So how do you continue to see whether the new ideology that you need to adopt, if that is an attractive ideology and a fashion of the time, and if it is relevant to you, how do you adopt that so that your followers continue to get the ideological support that you're looking out for? Non-fulfillment of needs. You promised me my value propositions. I thought my needs were going to be fulfilled. You are doing nothing about it. HR departments anywhere in the world, the day a guy's letter of appointment is given, believe that there is nothing more we need to do. He has bought into my foolery that I have given him. Now I don't need to do anything else. If Fair and Lovely does not make you Fair and Lovely, you don't buy Fair and Lovely as a customer. If organizations do not fulfill value propositions, which are the needs that followers exhibit, they should have tried. So why do we get surprised? We don't get surprised about the facts that we do not have mechanisms to fulfill the needs of the employees. We get fascinated by analyzing as to why are they leaving us despite us not fulfilling the needs. And that's the curiosity. The purpose, losing the purpose. The purpose is no longer true. The purpose is lost, so membership is gone. Ideologies change. Spiritual bond is broken. I'm no longer spiritually connected to the group. My leader has been caught in a sexual harassment case. How am I supposed to be following that leader? So if I have lost my spiritual connect with my leader, I do not accept anything that he is saying as a leader. Therefore, I want to also move out. Oftentimes we notice in organizations that when a leader is punished, and more so if he's a powerful, charismatic leader, the entire team over the next 1 year, you will see the fluidity going out. So they have nothing to do, they are not joining the leader in his new organization, they are going elsewhere, but a strongly bonded team tends to break away at that point of time. And transactional misalignments, as I told you, these are some of the reasons. Relational politics and treachery. Who better could explain than Shakespeare? Tiago, Julius Caesar, Macbeth, stories after stories, where leaders have fully trusted their team members, where leaders have fully trusted. But at some point of time, he did not outgrow his ambitions, but he actually started vying for the leader's position, could not find positive mechanisms to do that. It is only through treachery, and it is only through moving around the whole thing. And how many cases in living organizations beyond literature can I show you that? Each one I see having a smile on their face. Each one knows of one story at least in their versatile experiences where the followers did an act of treachery and disenabled the leader from performing. And the moment that happens, the entire team tends to break down. How do you build that relationship? How do you build that community? How do you build that community which is defining what are the behaviors is very important. Oftentimes we have this belief that the leader has it in mind. I have it in my mind as to what I want my followers to be doing. I presume that there is some divine knowledge that the followers will have so that they know what is in my mind. They know what I as a leader am expecting without me defining it. And I'm expecting them to understand all of that. After all, you are followers. Don't you understand me? But we do not communicate what as leaders, the values we want our people in the team or the followers to have. And as a consequence of which, absence of communication makes them accidentally violate it. And then there is this huge element of traffic and conflict. Why are you allowing him to do? I am not being allowed to do this. Why, therefore, are you favoring him and not punishing him when he violates it? Why are you asking me this question when I am violating it? And therefore, it is the lack of clarity of building a community around the values that you want your followers to have that causes the greatest problem. This is just, I'm not going to read it. What I'm saying gets enshrined in the Constitution of India. Part 4A, Article 51A tells you what are the duties of a citizen as a follower in a country. How many of us are even aware? Just because you're not a law student does not mean that the Constitution doesn't apply to you. You are a citizen of India. The country is expecting you to be having certain behaviors as a follower. We don't even know that. But certainly, when violations of these duties happen, each one of us has a violent voice to say what is going wrong with our country. But this is exactly what happens. Thank you. Followers continue to be very important. Followers continue to be your contributors to value creation. Leaders only give directions, but values are created by what your followers do. Followership is very, very important. Break open the shell, understand the 4 elements of value that a team is getting created, and positively as a leader, do the right things that you're supposed to do when you break open the shell. Thank you very much. I'm sure on this subject there are no questions. Thank you. Oh, there are. Oh, my God. I thought you wanted to go home early.
No, not when it comes to something like this.
Okay.
I found your presentation particularly inspiring. And what I'd like to ask you is, how do you represent this in your particular organization? Or how is this represented in your particular organization?
This is to be seen as behaviors in every organization, not commercial. You will see this in your house. You will see this in your building society meetings. You will see it in any organization, these behaviors being followed. Predominantly, these are human behaviors and does not have an organization as in a commercial organization context. It has a general application. Now, there are certain, and of course, within a half an hour to 1 hour time, I was supposed to be delivering this subject to you, so I couldn't get into the depth of it. But predominantly, each of this behavior can be observed, monitored, and coached. So if you are a leader and you understand this, then how do you assess your teams for these behaviors? Instead of going into the biography, instead of trying to do other kind of assessment, how do you see his behaviors in this domain? How do you coach him? How do you show him his shortcomings? And therefore, what do you do to change his behaviors? But at the same point of time, first of all, when you select on the team, are you aware what is the team reference? Is he going to be able to fit? As I told you, there cannot be a team of stars. So there are so many things you as a leader could do. Whenever you are free, or if you like to write to me on LinkedIn, write to me, I'll explain to you how it works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Welcome.
Very, very inspiring.
Thank you.
I just need one understanding further. When you're saying the followers provide motivation, I couldn't get that. Do you mean followers for themselves, they provide motivation, you just need to spark it, trigger it, or they provide motivation for the universe?
Both.
In which
So what happens is that, as I told you, the leader cannot motivate a follower. The follower has to self-motivate himself.
Totally.
But followers have a unique ability to vitiate the group, which is performing as a set of followers, create factions, and then not let the purpose of the group be achieved. Therefore, the criticality for the leader is to ensure that you're motivating this guy to do not only his job, but to be not able to vitiate the larger climate of followers.
The peer pressure.
Peer groups, peer communications, peer gossips. Okay. How many times peers gossip when something uniquely is happening in the organization? I see so many heads nodding as if it was happening this afternoon.
Sure.
At the coffee table, right? Lunch table. And don't please say coffee table and lunch tables, because they also do it in the bosses' cabins.
Absolutely.
So bosses are as prone to gossiping, because bosses are also team members. But this happens because of this entire thing, that we do not make the followers realize that they have
a responsibility.
They have a responsibility as a follower, and it is not only to do their task, but for the larger group to be able to perform. The cultural ethos of the organization.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, may I ask a follow-up to that?
Sure.
Between the two of us.
Till they can offer you tea after this.
So in an HR context, right? In an HR context, which is why we're here, in an HR conclave. In an HR context, is it our responsibility then to be able to groom the followers in a certain way such that they motivate themselves enough, as well as their other followers, so that our jobs are made easier?
How can HR do this at all? Why does HR want to take responsibility for things it can't deliver? The followers in the organization are followers of all different kinds of leaders. How will you be coaching people in the finance organization? How will you coach people in the supply chain organization? How will you groom people in the technology organization? HR can provide an enabling environment and the correct set of processes, measurements, and matrix to make this happen. But for HR to self-believe that it will be expected to deliver is exactly where the crisis today is. You need to make the operating managers believe that people management is part of their role. Make him understand this and provide an enabling environment through the processes and systems so that he can make it happen. Because they are his followers. He is the leader. How can you groom when he is the leader? What are you trying to do?
Followership is a topic that's very dear to my heart. I'm very excited about this and seeing presenting it. Have you done any research on the courage of followership as well? The first follower and the second follower and the impact that those individuals have as well?
Sure. In fact, courage becomes a very, very critical role. And at times, not only in what you're saying. The role of courage in a follower is to tell the leader at times boldly, and objectively, sorry sir, you are not doing the right thing, which oftentimes in a feudal society is seen as aggression and revolution or a mutiny, to tell a boss that I think you are not in the right track. So the followers are expected not only to be doing for themselves and for the larger group, but they're also expected to be the guards, to be able to tell the boss, sorry, in light of our ideologies, in terms of what we want to deliver, we think that this is not matching, convince us. Make us believe that what you're doing is right. Otherwise, you need to get convinced that we are right. Because now is the time for situational leadership. It is not a one leader all time. Make sense? Sure.
The practice that you talked about, entire followership principle and the way it's to be managed, at the core of it's very simple. At least from the presentation, if it looks like it. I mean, I know for somebody who doesn't know it like me, it would be very complex and how to do that. Richie, from that perspective, everything gets dependent on the operating leader then. So I think the question that you answered about Avantika's, the HR issue, technically that also applies to the L&D issue. So at the end of the day, it is the leader who should identify each and every aspect, skill gap analysis, opportunities to actually see how the people are being groomed, and where exactly the training program needs to hit to be able to turn around folks.
Sure.
So, but then my question is, how come most of the places, it's the training head? Now, I'm a business head myself of a very, very, very large training organization for a very large customer. Then, ultimately, at the end of the day, the training needs should actually come out of the operating head and not exactly a training leader.
Sure, it should be.
But then how come at the end of the day, right now it's still the training head who's deciding, let's do a training analysis of your organization, let me tell you the answer.
How come corporates are doing so many wrong things? Who's saying that just because corporates are doing things, they're doing the right way? Predominantly learning and development should be focused to the knowledge system of the organization, right?
Right.
How does it work? There is an organization capability. Organization capability are those things that create value for the business.
Correct.
That is what uniquely your organization has as compared to the competitor, which helps your organization create value.
Correct.
That capability is built on certain knowledge systems. The knowledge is not lost. You don't want to throw the baby with the bathwater. And that is why you want a knowledge management system and a transference, a logistic system for that knowledge to move from one set of people who have that experience to the next generation. The training department can only facilitate that, nothing else. Where the knowledge comes from, how the transference will happen is exactly what operations have to decide. Businesses have to decide. You can help them with knowledge of andragogy, learning processes, making the classrooms available, getting the facilitators who can deliver, being the custodian possibly of the knowledge systems, but cannot take the ownership for this transference. The needs have to come from business. Sure. A partner to the CEO to be able to do knowledge transference, and that is why you are talking about learning organizations. When Peter Senge talks about learning organizations, he's talking about that. But now what has happened is that it has become a fad in the employer branding process to consider every organization in a branding statement says, we are a learning organization. And we ask them simple questions when we go for the jury and when we are checking out. We ask them 5 simple questions. Can you tell me only one answer to it? What is the acid test of a learning organization? Do you have an assimilated knowledge management system? Does your organization lose knowledge every time that a manager leaves? Have you a process of documenting the knowledge of your organization linked to your capability? Sometimes, and let me scare you out, when I speak to HR managers and business CEOs, what is your organizational capability? So they tell me about the machining capacity. We can produce X numbers of things. I said, no, that's capacity, capability. Can you define what is capability? So whilst their branding statements make loud pronouncements of the organizations becoming learning organizations, they are not even mindful of what is the unique organization capability they have. Is everybody in this room, put your hand on your heart and tell me, do you really know your organization capabilities? How many of you really know? And how many of you tell your employees when you interview them, we are a learning organization? Ding dong. That answers you. Can I do my last bow? Oh, you have a question? Sure. Sure.
what the followership that he wants below him also needs to be
modified to his leaders, correct?
So, to what extent there is a misalignment? That's what I see. You know, you have a top management that has a kind of a leadership thought process or a thought leadership process. They have followers who follow them who have their own thought process. And by the time it trickles down, it loses its authenticity or its essence of the whole thing. How do you, in your own role as a follower leader, ensure that what the top management or the leader of that organization wants, how does it?
Okay, so I will tell you how I do it,
yes.
Okay, in my current organization. I could tell you 500 examples, I'll tell you in mine. So as soon as we make our annual business plan, and we make it, so it's not my boss makes it, and then he tells it to us, so we are in an audience listening and then asking questions. No. We get involved in the designing of the entire annual business plan. And when we get involved in the process of annual business plan and we take feedback of what is the economic situation, if we are in a zooming economy with the GDP at 7.5%, these are our sectoral economics, how are we going to be doing it? We put it through the organization capability test. So at that point of time, what do? I'll say, okay, our organization capability is project management. What are the projects that we are going to do? How are we going to deliver it? What is the cost going to be? So what we do is, first the annual business plan you make, and then you test it against the knowledge of the organization and the capability of the organization. Will we be able to create the value that we are saying we'll be able to create the value? Because finally, the value created is no longer valid if there is no earning per share or you are not declaring dividends for your investors, right? So value has to be monetizable value. If value is not monetizable, it is no longer value. After we do that, we embark on an entire communications journey where not only the senior leadership, through town halls, we disseminate the information, get the feedback, then we develop scorecards on it. So the way we develop scorecard is, we tell people to develop their scorecards, we put it as a public document, this is your annual business plan, you please make your scorecards, and then we do a town hall. So that whilst making your scorecard, you will have a zillion questions that will come into your mind. At that time, we will openly sit with you in a town hall to discuss this and convince you that this is the journey. And if we are not convinced, and if we do not have answers, we want to revalidate whether what we have done originally is right or wrong. And then periodically review it. So it has to be a process of communications, revalidation, and open discussions. Thank you very much.